Hello, everyone, and welcome to Turn Zero Loss, hosted by the Magic Engineers. Today, my two co-hosts are going to be challenging themselves to a game of wits. We're going to be asking ourselves, who understands the inherent rules of Magic better? Who could be the better judge to call when in need of clarification? To find out, we will, as in my last quiz, be going back and forth between the two of you, proposing a hypothetical scenario. In this hypothetical scenario, there's going to be a crucial game error. You could ask me one clarifying question that could help you get to the conclusion of which part is incorrect. This question could be the speed of a spell, ability, or on the stack, or any of the layers that exist while applying replacement effects. Are you both ready for the first question?
No, you're a monster. This is even harder than I thought it was going to be. I didn't know it was one-on-one. I thought you were just going to ask us both.
Hey.
You're a monster.
It's going back and forth, so I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to start this little slideshow. Let me know if y'all can see this.
So we have to find where the mistake was made in the ruling. Is that just to clarify this?
To clarify, you need to find the mistake in the play. So I'm going to read this in the scenario. Everything's going to play out, and then you need to tell me where in this scenario there was a mistake.
So we are the judges in the situation.
Correct.
I can actually live with this.
Yeah, nobody's called a judge or anything. This thing has just happened, and you are basically in post-mortem of the game, looking at it and being like, oh, this is what was wrong. Make sense?
Correct. Who's starting?
We're going to be starting with David. So,
Oh boy.
Are you guys able to see the slideshow and everything?
Yep.
All right, on to question one. So, player one in an EDH game casts a Thassa's Oracle, tapping a tropical island and Birds of Paradise to do so. The spell goes on the stack with priority being passed by all players. All players pass priority on the ETB trigger. Player one casts Demonic Consultation, naming Black Lotus by tapping a Chrome Mox imprinted with Yawgmoth's Will. The table once again passes priority, resulting in the player's remaining library being exiled due to Black Lotus not being in the deck or the top 6 cards of their library. Thassa's Oracle ETB resolves, and the player wins the game. What was wrong with this entire statement?
Why am I blanking on this? I know. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to reread Demonic Consultation.
If you would like, I can read it if you can't read it from your screen.
I can read it, yeah. What is Devotion on the table right now?
Devotion on the table currently is 2 with Thassa's Oracle entering the battlefield.
Okay. I assume Demonic Consultation cannot legally name a card that isn't in your deck.
Is that your final answer?
Yes.
Incorrect. Sherry.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. It's a very long-winded thing, so let me to go through it again. Player 1 in an EDH game casts a Thassa's Oracle, tapping a tropical island and a Birds of Paradise to do so. The spell goes on the stack with priority being passed by all players. All players pass priority on the ETB trigger. Player 1 plays Demonic Consultation, naming Black Lotus by tapping a Chrome Mox imprinted with Yawgmoth's Will. The table once again passes priority, resulting in the player's remaining library being exiled due to Black Lotus not being in the deck or the top 6 cards of their library. Thassa's Oracle's ETB resolves, and the player wins the game.
I know. I knew what it was once I heard it again.
Is it that they passed priority on the ETB, so the ETB trigger would have went off before Demonic Consultation would have hit the stack?
That is correct.
Yeah.
In order for player 1 to win the game in this scenario, they need to hold priority and respond to their own ETB on the stack with Demonic Consultation.
Let's go, baby.
I think you read that a little too fast for me to really get that.
That's my bad.
Yeah, I will say it slower for both of us.
I will read it a little slower for the next one. So, 1 point to Sherry. Next question goes to Sherry. So, player 1 in this scenario has a Magus of the Moon in play. Player 2 taps 2 islands and plays Imprisoned in the Moon, targeting, I don't know, are you guys able to see that notification that just came up?
Where?
No.
Okay, cool, awesome. Just making sure, because there's a notification that popped up on my screen. I want to make sure it didn't show up. Back to the start of this. Player 2 taps 2 islands and plays Imprisoned in the Moon, targeting Magus of the Moon. Player 2 then taps their tropical island for green mana and 2 islands to cast Yisan the Wanderer Bard. And that's the end of the scenario.
Was Magus of the Moon on the battlefield?
That is correct.
So the way that this went was in Magus of the Moon, and then that the opposing player cast the Imprisoned on the Moon after it was on the battlefield.
That's correct.
Then they couldn't have where were the lands?
It was a tropical island and 2 islands.
They would not have been able to cast the Imprisoned in the Moon because Tropical Island is a non-basic. Wait, no, never.
Sorry, they had paid the proper amount of mana for Imprisoned in the Moon, and they used the mana after the fact to cast Yisan.
They would have been... So they already had the mana for Imprison on the Moon, then they cast the next two, or then Yisan.
Yes.
Doesn't the Mangus effect still go through the Imprison on the Moon? That's my answer. So it was unable to cast Yisan?
That's correct. Because Magus of the Moon's replacement effect happens on the same layers as Imprisoned in the Moon, its effect happens first, then Imprisoned in the Moon happens. Therefore, what is the state of the Magus of the Moon?
It is technically a land, colorless land, with and without the non-basic lands are mountains, and the tap ability on it. Is that correct?
It's fairly close, but technically it's a non-basic land mountain, colorless.
Okay.
Meaning that it would be a mountain. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just a colorless mountain, which is really funky because layers are weird. That is a point to Sherry. To David, I'm so sorry that I gave you another complicated one, but here we go. For this question, you can assume that if a player does not respond to a spell on the stack, that they have passed priority for this round of priority, and that all mana costs are properly covered by mana sources available to the players. Make sense?
Sure.
All right, here we go. I have a nice little visual for this, so hopefully it helps keep things in mind. Player 1 casts Silence. Player 3 responds with a Swan Song. Player 1 responds with a Pact of Negation, targeting Swan Song. Player 4 responds with a Reiterate, targeting Pact of Negation, with the target being Silence on the new copy. Player 1 responds with a... I missed the Swan Song in here. Player 1 responds with a Swan Song of their own, targeting the Swan Song from Player 3. So there should be a Swan Song in the stack here as well, but I messed that up. Player 2 casts a Mental Misstep countering Player 1's Swan Song. Things are a little complicated here, so let me tell you how the stack resolves. The stack resolves with Mental Misstep countering Swan Song from Player 1, Pact of Negation countering Silence, Pact of Negation countering Swan Song, and then that's the end of the stack. The turn order proceeds as normal, and during Player 4's combat step, casts a Path to Exile targeting Player 1's commander, Thrasios Triton Hero. Where is the error?
Okay. So whose turn is this stack interaction taking place on? Player 1's or Player 2's?
Starts on Player 1.
Okay. And Player 2 casts the Silence against Player 1? I'm just trying to make sure it's clear in my head.
Player 1 casts Silence.
Okay. Player 1 casts Silence. And Player 2 Path to Exiled, correct?
Player 4 casts Path to Exile.
And the Path to Exile happens on the next turn after this stack goes off, right?
Yep.
Okay. Pact of Negation... Is the Pact of Negation cost paid?
That is correct. Pact of Negation's cost was not paid for. Therefore,
Yep.
Player 4 would lose the game.
The game.
Good job, David.
Point for David. Question 4. These are really long-winded. I'm so sorry.
Make sure to update and share this PowerPoint with me. It will be graded later.
Yes, of course. To Sherry, Player 1 cracks a Scalding Tarn to fetch up a Badlands into play, paying 1 life to do so. Player 2 responds by cracking a Flooded Strand, also paying 1 life to do so, and putting into play a Breeding Pool, paying 2 life to have it enter untapped. Player 1's fetch resolves, and they play a Myriad Landscape that enters the battlefield tapped for their land for turn. Player 3 responds to the land being played by casting Ad Nauseam. They lose a total of 34 life with the cards they reveal from Ad Nauseam, all of which are irrelevant to this scenario. Player 1 passes their turn to Player 2, who during their main phase 1 casts a Wheel of Fortune, forcing each player to discard their hand and draw 7 cards.
Do you say discard 7 cards?
Discards their hand and then draws 7 cards, is what I said.
So, to make this clear, did he respond to Myriad Landscape entering the battlefield? Or was it...
That is correct. He did respond to that.
Technically, you can't respond to a land entering the battlefield because it is a special action. You can respond to the triggers of a land, but not the actual land itself. Is that the answer?
That is correct. Point for Sherry. I see this misplayed all the time, so that's why I want to bring it up as a point of note, because I see people responding to lands being played, and they can't unless there's a trigger on the stack.
It is a special action for playing a land.
Correct. Question 5 goes to David. Player 1 casts Dimir Kirun during their main phase 1 and passes their turn. Player 2 attacks Player 1 with a 1/1 Goblin token during their combat phase. Player 1 pays the necessary mana to animate the key rune into a creature, declaring this creature a blocker for the goblin. Player 2 casts a shock in their main phase 2, targeting the key rune. Player 1 taps the key rune and casts the spell targeting shock. Shock is countered, and player 2 ends their turn.
Okay, so
If you need me to repeat any part, I can.
okay, yeah. So I guess the question would be like, I have to look because I'm pretty sure that 2 mana ability is a replacement effect that makes it a 2/2 horror, and it doesn't have that ability to tap for mana.
Is that your answer?
Oh, the goblin can't block. Or wait, no, that's not it. That's not it. Just read that wrong. Yeah, I'll go with that as my answer.
I believe that is technically correct. I must look up the ruling on this card just to make sure that I didn't miss that when I was doing this quiz.
I'm pretty sure you can tap it. There's nothing saying that. Well, unless it entered the battlefield that turn. Or
Well, it did.
yeah, David would be correct. You can't tap it for mana then.
Yeah, yes, it's already... So either way, he is correct in the fact that because it entered the battlefield that turn, it still has Summoning Sickness and is unable to tap for mana.
Yep. And it's made
So
a creature because of the replacement effect. It would tap beforehand, before you made it a 2/2, then it would have been fine. But
Yep.
it wouldn't have been able to block, so it's moot.
On to the
Point
next
for David.
one. It's a point for David, correct. Question 6 is to Sherry. Player 1 casts Swords to Plowshares, targeting... Well, before they can even target anything, player 2 begs them to not target their commander, who has been rule zeroed into this commander game, by the way. Is a conversation that has occurred, and all players agreed with this, that their commander, Golos Tireless Pilgrim,
Yeah.
shouldn't be the target of this spell. Player 1 makes no promise, and before the player can target a creature, player 2 casts Glint, giving Golos hexproof until end of turn. Player 1 then targets player 3's commander, Thrasios Triton Hero, exiling it and gaining the player 1 life.
The error is that he. Well, I think there's 2 errors technically in this. Number 1, unless I'm understanding this wrong, so you do have to put it on the stack with a target to actually for the spell to enter the stack, I believe. And he either responded or to a thing without a target, or that he cast it beforehand. Which, if it was before it was cast, then he could target Thrasios. But if he didn't name it beforehand, he couldn't. It's kind of a weird situation. I think the fact that he cast Glint before it was named was one of the errors. You can't change targets or...
Correct. So the fundamental error of this is that player 2 responded before player 1 had declared a target.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I was just trying to find a way to word it.
And I figured out that's what you were trying to say. So yes, there were technically 2 errors in this, but the main error that started the second error was the first one.
The third error was
And
laying Golos on the table at all.
Correct.
Yes. But we don't talk about that because, again, it's a rule 0 and it was brought in as one of those things. So, but yes, that is a point for Sherry.
That's a moral error, not necessarily a rules error.
That's correct.
That was they made a mistake in letting it in that game. The fact that it was on the board does not matter at that point.
So,
Correct.
question 7 doesn't have very many visuals because it involves a lot of looking at various things. So, I apologize.
You're really getting me with this one, Eli.
Yes. Player 1 pays the necessary mana to cast an opposition agent in response to a fetch land being cracked by player 2. Player 1, while searching, sees that there's a counterspell in player 2's hand. Player 3 then flashes in an opposition agent at the end of player 2's turn. Player 4 casts a Vampiric Tutor during player 3's upkeep, having forgotten about both of the Oppo agents in play. Player 1 searches player 4's library and exiles a Jeweled Lotus for themselves to be able to play at another time.
Okay, run that one by me again. I'm sorry.
This is a hard one. I had a hard
lot.
time keeping track of it.
That was a lot, dude.
All right. So I'll start to simplify this down into the best that I can. Assume that there's no... I can't really say there's no errors in here because I have to kind of find out where the error is. So I guess read it from the start again. Player 1 casts an opposition agent in response to a fetch land being cracked by player 2. All the necessary mana is paid for. There's no errors in this. Player 1, while searching, sees that there is a counterspell in player 2's hand. They are searching player 2's library at this point. Player 3, then at the end of player 2's turn, flashes in an opposition agent of their own. Player 4 casts a Vampiric Tutor during player 3's upkeep, having forgotten about the Oppo agent in play. Player 1 searches Player 4's library and exiles a Jeweled Lotus for them to be able to play at another time.
Okay. So does Player 2 have an opposition agent out right now?
Player 3 and Player 1 both have one.
Okay. So when Player 1 gains control of Player 4 during the search, would Player 3 and Player 4 gain that as well? That's kind of where I'm leaning with this. Like, there'd be some strange replacement effect where Player 3's Oppo and Player 4's Oppo also commits a control action.
Player 4 does not have an opposition agent.
Player
to
3
clarify.
in that case.
Yeah. You're almost there, and I think due to the complexity of this, I need to ask for a little bit more.
So, in that case, if Player 3, with Player 3's Oppo agent out, while Player 1 is searching Player 4's library with the Oppo agent, would Player 3 be searching Player 1's library as well?
That is incorrect.
Okay, yeah.
Sherry?
So player 4 was the one who cast the Vampiric Tutor and the Upkeep with the 2 other opposition agents up, correct?
That's
Would
correct.
it be the player 3 gets to look at it first and then oh, wait. Actually, would it be just player 1 who gets to control the search because of timestamp?
It is actually Player 3 that would get to control. You almost were there. So it looks at the most recent effect that is on the board, since both are replacement effects that are happening simultaneously. Player 3's happened the most recently, therefore Player 3 gets to control Player 4 while they search their library. And then Player 1 has no choice in the matter. Simply because, technically, Player 4 could decide which player gets to control them, but Player 3's replacement effect means that they are controlling them, and they would decide that Player 3 would get
They would
to
decide
search.
themselves they could. Question, if they were searching
Yes.
for multiple cards, would both of them get to look, or is it just one? It's not both.
It's just one. The simultaneous replacement effects mean that the continuous replacement would happen only for that continuous
Okay.
player. So no
That was
points
a
for
hard
either
one.
of you.
I don't.
I feel very victimized right now. I'm going to put that out there because I've gotten all the really nasty ones.
I'm sorry.
I forgive you. Just let the record show I will not forget.
Okay, understandable. On to question 8 for Sherry. Player 1 has their commander, Kenrith Returned King, Returned King, on the battlefield. Player 2 then casts Ixodron, turning all creatures on the battlefield into 2/2 colorless creatures with no abilities. Player 1 then casts Raised by Giants, and equips a Fire Shrieker onto the 2/2 creature that they control, swinging it at Player 2. Player 2 takes 4 damage, going down to 34 life.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. Player 1 has their commander, Kenrith the Returned King, on the battlefield. Player 2 casts Ixodron, turning all creatures into 2/2 creatures with no abilities. Player 1 casts Raised by Giants, and then equips a Fire Shrieker onto the 2/2 creature that they control, swinging it at Player 2. Player 2 takes 4 damage, going down to 34 life. Assume that all speeds of these cards have happened at the correct
And the
moments.
correct mana costs were paid.
So, and the correct mana costs have been paid for each one of these.
I'm guessing that the commander is actually a quality, so which it actually should be a 10/10 with double strike, so it actually should be 20 damage.
That is correct.
Wait, how? I don't
Commander's a
understand that,
quality,
because-
not necessarily a ability, I believe.
But when Ixodron enters the battlefield, it turns all creatures into 2/2s. Like,
Yes.
but that hits the third face of the card though, where they become like kind of nebulous tokens.
So it might be called like a nebulous token, but it's still a commander at quality. So things that alter anything that is on a card, so say it being like turned into a 3/3 elk from Kenra's transformation, it is still an elk. It is still your commander in the end.
Okay. All right.
So even if it was like Dark Steel Mutation or anything like that.
Like, commander will always be there regardless, because there's no real way to remove that quality.
Sure.
If I have that correctly.
Okay.
It's a weird rule that I feel like needs more talking.
I kind of know this, but this is like one of the most unintuitive things, and I bet a lot of people miss
Yes.
it. I wish they would just kind of modify the rules so that they either make it more clear or don't allow for this board state to happen.
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense to me that when Ixodron comes out, it doesn't just turn them into a 2/2 token. Like, that kind of confuses me a little bit. I understand why. I understand the ruling on face value, but like it was more the Ixodron play that was confusing me.
Yep, I was confused too because when he said 4 damage, I was like, wait a minute. I was expecting him to say 20 damage, and I would just done the opposite. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's equality.
Right, but I
it was equality. So got a point.
On to question 9 for David.
All right, you better be nice here, Eli, or I'm gonna get you.
Again, assuming all spells have the proper mana costs. This is not relevant for this question. So, player 1 casts Teferi's Protection to save themselves from a lethal swing from Blighted Agent. They currently have 9 poison counters as it stands. So this hit would put them to 10, forcing them to lose the game. The other 2 opponents of player 2 also have 9 poison counters. So player 2 is the owner of Blighted Agent. Player 2 then casts Tezzeret's Gambit in their second main phase, proliferating the poison counters on his other 2 opponents that are currently phased in. Player 3 and 4 lose the game. On player 1's turn, he phases back in and swings out his board to deal lethal damage to player 2 and win the game.
All permanents you control phase out. Yeah, but the player themselves does not phase out. So they do not have protection. Well, they have protection from everything, but that doesn't affect Proliferate. Proliferate just hits all counters of a certain type.
That's right.
I mean, technically, you can choose to omit them, but
you could choose to omit them. In this case, the player 2
he would
wants
just
to win
choose
the
3
game.
because the token itself, the counter itself.
yes, I'm just saying, like, if the player would have known, he would have chose to proliferate it because it's a choose effect. It's not even a target effect. That's the weird thing about proliferate.
Yep.
Well, yeah, sure, but again, like I'm sure it doesn't really matter in the situation.
Yeah,
it's just
I'm just clarifying just so
Either
I was
way.
like, he was basically the error was that he was not aware that proliferate circumvents any type of protection any type of protection.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was the
This is a learning quiz, so for the people at home, you get to learn something new. Hopefully,
what you
have
learned
fun
today
with it.
is play Tezzeret's
Pretty
game.
solid.
Yeah. The last question, because I've only done 10 since of how long-winded these questions are and how kind of aggravating it could be to try to sit here and listen to me talk about a hypothetical scenario. To Sherry, player 1 casts a dress down during the upkeep of player 2.
Love this card.
They do so with the intent of stopping player 2 from winning the game with a Devoted Druid combo that is on the board. In this case, it is Luxior and Devoted Druid, with some sort of mana sink. Player 2 casts an Opulence to make Dress Down into a creature, therefore freeing up their Devoted Druid combo by making it lose all abilities. So Opulence doesn't have a modern text. I have to clarify this. It's a Opalescence. Whatever. Opalescence does not have a modern card text, but it actually has been eroded to non-aura enchantments.
Can you repeat the scenario from the beginning, just so I'm clear?
Absolutely. Player 1 casts a Dress Down during the upkeep phase of player 2. They do so with the intent of stopping player 2 from winning the game with a Devoted Druid combo that is on the board, which in this case is Devoted Druid and Luxior, Gyada's Gift. Then player 2 casts an Opalescence. I don't know why I keep saying opulence. An Opalescence to make Dress Down into a creature, therefore freeing up their Devoted Druid combo by making it lose all abilities.
I hate Opalescence ones. This is a similar thing to the Magus of the Moon. Because it still gets turned into a creature, its previous effect is still an effect, which still blocks the combo, right?
That is correct. It's a weird little interaction that people have to be careful of. It doesn't happen often, but if Dress Down is turned into a creature,
its ability's still there.
It loses all of its abilities, but its ability is still there.
Because it's still technically an enchantment.
And also, fun fact, for those that aren't aware of this, because of this, the creatures lose all abilities. Static ability is there for the rest of the game until Dress Down is destroyed, because Dress Down loses the ability to sacrifice itself at the beginning of the end step. Fun little tidbit.
You know, actually, I'm surprised I didn't see more Opalescence on this quiz.
Yeah, I'll expect you at least 2 questions with Opalescence, but it was just this one.
Yep, and that's it. That is the quiz.
I hate you, and I'm not going to go easy.
Winner, chicken dinner. I got all 5 of mine and +1. Let's go.
I hope you all had fun. It took me a while to come up with some of these scenarios, so I would appreciate people in the comments providing any mistakes that I might have made, because doing this all by myself took a a lot of mental capacity, so I probably messed up somewhere in there. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, follow us on Twitter at Lost Turn, and hopefully you'll keep watching our videos, and we'll see you next
Bye.
time.
Goodbye.